Hello Internet, in this video I'm going to be doing an illustration inspired by Paleo Pines. So that's right, in this video I'm going to be doing an illustration which I haven't done on the channel for quite a while. It was one of my first videos that I was doing that. But I thought I'd mix it up a little bit. Don't worry, I'm not going away from miniatures, I will be back to them in the next video. I just thought I'd change it up a little bit and show you a different side of my creativity. So for this video, I thought I would take you through the whole process of me creating this illustration, which is a piece of fan art for the game Paleo Pines, which was recently released. I've been playing it a lot on my Nintendo Switch. It's a really cute farming simulator thing where you get to befriend dinosaurs and they help you out with your farming, and I've always loved dinosaurs. It's just cute and humble, so yeah, I quite enjoy it. So the first thing I'm going to do for this project is I'm just going to get inspired. I'm going to top up my creative bank account and scale away any creative block. Creative block is something that we all struggle with. If you'd like to see a video on that subject, please let me know in the comments below, because it's something that I would quite like to talk about, but I don't know if anybody wants to listen. So I spend around 20 minutes going through various art books that I own, and these are ranging from personal sketchbooks to more project-based books that are related to the subject matter that I'm going to be working on. So I've got the art books of two of my favourite illustrators, Derek Laufman and Jake Parker. I'm also using Dinosaurs of the Wild West by Sean Keenan and Dinotopia by James Gurney as inspiration for dinosaur-specific imagery. I'm also flicking through a small graphic novel which is entirely done with watercolour, it's just beautiful. It's called Cody by Jared Cullen. Now as I flick through these books, I am marking individual pages that for me are sparking some kind of creativity, whether that be a certain composition I quite like, a certain design element, certain colour scheme, anything that I think, yes, that would work in what I'm going for. I bookmark it so that I can reference it later. Once I've had a flick through all these things and potentially looked at some other bits and bobs on Pinterest or whatever, I decide I'm going to head over to the computer. And I don't often do this, but I'm going to do my sketches digitally. And that is so I'm a bit less restricted in terms of how many thumbnails I'm doing and how much of my sketchbook it would be taking up. I am also able to, if I want, to pick a thumbnail that I create and copy and paste it into a different workbook, blow it up and draw over the top of that. So the whole point of thumbnailing is to try and figure out the composition and what kind of story you're trying to tell. All that I really knew going into this was that I wanted to have Lucky the Parasaurolophus, which is the only named dinosaur that you are given at the beginning of the game, so therefore it's kind of like the face of the whole game, and one human character, which is probably going to be my own character. I'm not saying we're limited to one, I'm just saying that's the bare minimum. So my playable character and Lucky the Parasaurolophus. The thumbnailing stage is always really useful because you can really experiment with what story you're trying to tell, and as I didn't really know at this point, it was quite useful. In my head, I thought it might be mid-journey, like they're walking over the horizon of a mountain or something, which is what I do in my first thumbnail. In my second one, they're coming more round a mountain. I play about with this travelling concept a little bit before I come across a idea where they're camping, as in they're taking a break from a long journey or they're resting overnight or something. I end up quite liking this one, and the reason for it is it displays a bit of intimacy between the two characters. It's not just as simple as they are on an adventure together. It's showing they have a bit of a genuine friendship, almost by sitting with each other in a relaxed state, and having the human character talking makes it look as if though they're sharing stories. I think it's a much nicer story and not necessarily the one that you would immediately go for, which would be more of an action shot. I think something as reserved as this can really force you to play about with atmosphere, whereas you can rely on the action in other compositions a bit more. So it was going to push me in a creative way, which I was quite looking forward to. I decided I quite liked the idea of having leaves in the foreground, as if though you are peering into what they're doing through a bush or something. Not that you're like spying on them, but it just creates more of an intimate and private setting, which to me helps build their relationship a bit and just adds another dimension to the image. Once I had selected a thumbnail that I was happy with, I highlighted it and copy and pasted it into a new workbook where I blew it up to the size of an A3 page, brought the opacity right down, and then I started to draw over the top of it, finalising some details, but not going too far because I add quite a lot of detail when it comes to actually doing the inking. So I was suggesting the shapes of the bushes and what types of leaves I wanted in the foreground, drawing the basic shapes of both the characters, working out the expressions and stuff. And this was really just about building the scene before I render it physically with my trusty brush pen. Once I was happy with how the sketch was looking, I decided to print it off on a piece of A3 Bristol board. Now, Bristol board is one of my favourite 2D mediums to draw on, mainly because of how it acts with my brush pens, and that is my chosen way to ink. I'm not particularly fond, personally, of using an actual brush or a dip pen or fine liners or anything like that. I really like the variation you get, but the control you also get with a brush pen. When inking this, I had a bit of folded card underneath my hand, which I am very grateful for, because I can't tell you the number of times I've been working on something and then I go over somewhere that I've already inked and I smudge it with the side of the palm of my hand. But having this piece of paper there will prevent that, which is great. Also, to try and limit this, I try and work from the left side of the page to the right. Now, a few basic rules of thumb that I have come up with for my inking process is when I'm trying to suggest something has quite a bit of weight or that is closer to me, I will use thicker lines. So on the bottom of items, they normally have quite thick lines. That is to suggest the weight. And as you can see, the leaves in the corners and all that, they have quite thick lines as well. And that is just to suggest that they are closer to us and that the Parasaurolophus and our character are in more towards the mid-ground rather than the foreground. Normally I would go quite heavy on shading lines or hatching, or I'm not entirely sure what I'd call them because it's not cross-hatching, but I do tiny little brush strokes, which I would refer to as movement lines because I normally do it on the places that would be under tension. So if you look at the Parasaurolophus, where it meets the ground on its stomach and the areas that are twisting on its neck, they all have these lines that suggest a bit of movement. I go a bit lighter on this piece than I normally would. Normally I would be adding quite a lot of these to most items, but I wanted to push myself with colour later in the process, so I decided I was going to try and add more depth with that than my line work. Once I was happy with where I'd got the line work to, I decided to scan in this A3 page, get it back onto the computer and start working digitally again. And this is mainly to clean up the line work. I wanted it to be the blackest blacks and the whitest whites, so that when it came to colouring, I had basically a clean canvas, the purest form of the work that I could get, and it would help remove those pencil-y, well, they're not quite pencil lines, but the lines that were made on the computer earlier, I could get rid of those completely. Now, when it came to colouring, I'd considered doing it digitally, and I played about with it a bit, and I may still do a digital variation on this because I don't have that much experience colouring digitally, but the ones I have done have turned out really nice, and I'd like to see how this would turn out. But what I opted to do was print out these new tidied up lines onto another piece of A3 Bristol board and then set to work with my watercolours. I have always loved using watercolours. I think they can give quite a natural feel to a piece, because whilst you obviously can control them, they do also act on their own quite a bit. There's a definite natural behaviour to them, which I think helps make all of it feel a bit more organic. Now, before I actually set to work on the colouring, I did something I haven't done before, and that was make a grayscale version of my finished image, or a value map, I believe proper people call them. So I had my line work scanned in and I shrunk it down to really small and just went in with a grey pen kind of thing and different intensities, sketching out where I want the different values to be. So I'm going to keep the lightest area in the middle as to direct your eyes to the characters, and then I'm going to have all the leaves and the bushes that are in the foreground be quite dark to act as a frame kind of thing, and to suggest that it's in shadow and you're peering through into a light area where Lucky and me are sat in the middle of this like foresty thing. I did a couple variations on this. The first one was a little flat, so I thought, hey, how would it look if I introduced some rays of sun in the second one? And whilst it looks really cool like that, I thought it was just a little bit too complicated for what I was wanting to do with this piece. For me, it was a little bit too complicated for this thing in particular because I wanted a finished product, but this would require quite a bit of experimentation for me to learn how to have the varying colours that would be affected by sunlight and stuff. It would just take too long for what I wanted this project to be. So whilst it is really cool, it's not necessarily appropriate for my personal goals for this piece. Now, the last one was a correction of our first attempt. My first attempt, it is all adding shadows and there are no highlights. Now, just like in miniature painting, it makes sense to have highlights to suggest which bits are most exposed to light and stuff. So in my third attempt, I decided to erase some of the greys that I'd already put on like the edge of leaves and the tops of the tent and stuff. And it just added a lot more dimension to it and I was really happy with it. So I printed all of these off and used it as a reference when it actually came to colouring the piece. As I had my value study, I knew that I wanted to have the shrubs and leaves in the foreground be darker, as to suggest that they are in shadow and you are looking through into a lightened area that is a bit more exposed, where our team has made camp for the afternoon. I didn't want to simply use a darker green when it came to colouring the leaves and stuff. So I did two variations on green and then started to introduce purple to the mix. And this is because purple always goes really well with green, so I thought it would act as a lovely shadow colour. I'd only use it in the darker areas and leave the lightest bits actually a quite vibrant green. I also don't do everything in the exact same type of green, so when it came to the bushes in the mid-ground, just behind our adventurers, I actually did a wash of yellow to begin with to set that initial tone, and then went over with a lighter green on the top, which unintentionally made this piece look quite autumnal in the end, I think. The use of purples, which have quite a bit of red in it, and then yellow on the highest points of the leaves, it just looked very autumnal or fallish. How do Americans say that something looks like fall? It can't be foolish, can it? Anyway, that was quite a happy accident. I really like this piece turning out looking like it was during the middle of autumn. Pretty much the only thing that I don't mix various colours for is the Parasaurolophus in the middle. And that is because this character has a pre-established colour scheme and I want him to stand out, so I want him to have quite pure colours. I keep saying him, and it's a girl, so sorry about that. She has quite defined colours and I want them to really stand out and make her be the focal point of the piece. So I'm trying to keep the colours as pure as possible. When it came to doing the sky, I was just going to do a light transition from white to blue for a normal sky look, but I ended up actually doing a sunset kind of thing. So I did an area of pink, and then at the bottom it was more yellowy. Up top was blue, transitioning into darker blue and a little bit of purple again. This purple appears everywhere in this painting, so it ended up actually kind of being a mother colour, which is a colour that is used consistently throughout a piece to try and tie all of the colours together, making it look quite coherent. I was really nervous about doing the sky because it was the last thing left to do, and I just feared that if I screwed it up, the whole piece would be, because to get a proper sunset effect is quite difficult, and I was worried that what I was going to do would just look a bit naff, and it is not perfect by any means, so I wouldn't even necessarily say it's good, but I think it's appropriate for this piece. I think it works well as a background, given how much is going on in the front, to have this hint of pink in a background that isn't really there anywhere else. Now, as a final step, I wanted to darken the edges of the whole piece and use another purple across the whole thing to make all of the shadows and stuff actually link together. Now, to do this, I got out my airbrush, and this is not something I've ever done before. With the tape still being on the piece, I was able to lightly go around the edges of the painting with an airbrush with some purple paint in it, just to darken it all and tie it all together, and I think it actually works really nicely. So I hope you enjoyed this departure from normal, going for a bit of illustration rather than miniature painting. If you don't, that's fine. Leave a comment down below. I'll just be sad about it. It's cool. I'm thinking about potentially selling this as an A4 print. So if you would like that, let me know in the comments down below and I will look into adding it to my website. If you are interested in my illustration work, there will be a link to my website in the description down below. So please check it out. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and if you did enjoy it, consider giving it a thumbs up and potentially subscribing to the channel to see more videos like this inserted into your subscription feed. And until next time, I will see you later.